Hi, this is Jim Peters. I'm the president of the Responsible Hospitality Institute. We're a private nonprofit organization that's been contracted to work with your city, looking at some of the trends that are happening and ways in which we can help bring the resources we've developed over the years to help and guide you towards creating what we call the Sociable City Plan. The quote that I have showing a community's opportunity for socializing is among the most influential factors in determining where people choose to live was a report from 2010 by the Knight Foundation Soul of the Community Project. But this really represents what we believe this project is about is how can you as a city and how can everybody within the city work together to create a sociable city plan. So this particular session is an introduction to the approach that we take and the philosophies that we use. So we like to begin with the end in mind, what we call life at night. Um, and the first thing that we want to emphasize is that we have specific aims that we bring to the community, but we also work to try to gather everybody's perspective that we come into contact as to what they see the vision as being and what they feel needs to be improved. But basically, as we've worked with over 80 North American cities over the past 20 years, it always seems that these are some common themes that emerge. They may not all relate to your city, but we just want to present it as what we begin with. To preserve and advocate for social, cultural, and economic value of dining and entertainment, to examine risk factors for crime, harm, and disorder that can often be associated with social districts, particularly late at night and in the early morning hours. Sustain peaceful coexistence of residents and businesses in mixed-use areas. And this is becoming increasingly important as you're beginning to see residential development and social areas melding together more. And then finally, we want to enhance communication between government and business regarding policy, procedures, and resource allocation. Project objectives that we have is to select and train dedicated staff to become leading advocates for a safe and vibrant life at night. Through the course of this process, we'll engage more than 60 people from very many different perspectives, but we'll be providing through e-learning and on-site training and facilitation, certain core principles and approaches that we've learned from our experience and how they might be applicable to your current situation. We also aim to develop a citywide alliance model to implement a consensus-driven action plan. Over the past decade, we've seen more cities, not only in the United States, but around the world, recognizing the value of dining and entertainment, particularly accentuated during COVID when we were isolated from those local establishments where we would meet our friends, family, and coworkers. So cities have begun to organize dedicated offices. They're called entertainment commissions or nightlife office or office of nightlife and culture with staff that would be directors or nighttime economy managers, or the popular term is the night mayor. And then finally, we want to establish a data collection method for you to evaluate and monitor progress over time in sociability, risk, and compliance. And this is something that we would want to leave you with. And while we won't do a comprehensive analysis, we'd certainly help you to begin to get the basic foundations that you need. Now, we operate in terms of the sociable city vision and the future sociability with certain guiding principles. One is that we define sociability as sharing an experience with other people that stimulates the senses, intellect, or emotions. Hospitality is creating the social space for people to dine, drink, listen to music, and dance. Responsible hospitality is assuring a safe and secure environment accessible to all. Nightlife is the social activity or entertainment available at night in a town or city. And the social economy, what some refer to as the nighttime economy, is the collective revenue and employment generated by hospitality businesses, as well as the many suppliers that operate during the day, most frequently, of products and services to support sociability during the day, evening, and late night. So I want to leave these principles in the background. We talk about a social district, but some people call it an entertainment district. We used to call it a hospitality zone, which we sometimes still use as a reference point. But the definition is a mixed-use area or a cluster of businesses with a variety of dining and entertainment, as well as public space activities such as festivals, events, and markets to facilitate intergenerational and intercultural socializing. The social experience is the common underlying attraction that draws people to a social district. And while they're there, they may do shopping in retail stores or conduct business with banks or insurance companies. But ultimately, when they gather in these places, they take the time to meet friends or coworkers or conduct business in social spaces. COVID actually dramatically changed some of how we socialize and how we spend our dollars. And we've seen also a younger generation that's entering the consumer market that has a focus on experiential, Instagrammable daytime and nighttime sociability. Have you noticed how frequently now people take photographs of their meals or their drinks or be with their friends in certain places? So this is really becoming part of the goal of venues is to create an experience that people would want to share with others. Alcohol consumption trends, there's some disturbing growth in impaired driving, but for the most part, we've seen a shift that people are switching to higher quality craft beer and wines, as well as mixology and distilled spirits and craft distilleries that are becoming popular and in many cases being opened right within the downtown area. But there's also a growth in the number of new alcohol-free creations. With the availability of so many fruit juices and so many um, uh, uh, products that come throughout the world with unique flavors and textures, this is all being incorporated into alcohol-free as well as alcoholic beverages. Public space uses with outdoor seating, vendors, markets, events, and festivals. And in a way, when you look at the public space area, in some cases, it's actually becoming a venue, what we call the street as a venue, which really is approaching a need to have a dedicated person that just manages that intersection of not only the different outdoor seating, rooftop decks, patio seating, but the vendors, the food trucks, the street markets, the events, the festivals that take over areas, as well as the introduction of bike lanes and scooters and taking over parking areas for outdoor dining or closing streets for activity. All of this is creating the street as a venue. Renewed focus on inclusion, diversity, equity, accessibility, and sustainability, what we refer to as ideas. And this is really, again, one of those areas, if you're catering to that young emerging population, they're sensitive to all of these different issues, in particular sustainability and DEI, or diversity, equity, and accessibility. The creation of safer, more enjoyable experiences for women. Women have become some of the most important uh, uh, decision makers as to where people socialize. They tend to also seek places that are safer and that are more accessible and where they feel comfortable with multiple choices in terms of mixed drinks and wines and non-alcoholic beverages, as well as unique foods that can be healthy. These are all some of the market forces that are changing because of the introduction of more women in making those decisions. And then finally, hospitality and nightlife businesses during COVID had to become better organized and had to work with their staff to be better trained. And today, the consumer's expectations continues to grow. So the idea of training is going to become also an important future in terms of trends and opportunities in hospitality. So as we've done our work, as I said before, which we began in the early 2000s with the focus on downtown district development and planning, we really began to, through a series of focus groups and roundtables and discussions and research, identified four primary areas that are necessary for a sociable city plan: the foundation, planning, safety, and vibrancy. So these are the kind of pillars of our approach. And you'll hear us reference the building blocks as we go through the process. To help create a metaphor for how we see the work that we do and what we want to do in working with your city, I tell a story about a very wealthy man who visited his friend, and she had just built a new house, and they took a tour, and they went to the first floor and the second floor and then the third floor. And while he was up on the third floor, he could look out over the countryside, and then he could go to the opposite end and look out over the city. And he said, "This is the type of place that I want." So he found the same contractor, and he said, "I don't care what it costs. I want you to build the house the same way as my friend." So the contractor is laying the foundation, and the man comes and says, "What are you doing?" And the contractor says, "Well, I'm laying a foundation." And the man said, "Oh, well, I don't want a foundation." Well, then the contractor said, "Yeah, but I need the foundation to have the first floor." The man said, "I don't want a first floor." So now the contractor's confused and said, "Yeah, but I need the first floor to have the second floor." The man said, "No, no, no, I just want the third floor." So a lot of times when we look at people's vision, that's what they see. And they don't look at what it takes to get there. So young adults don't recognize that a lot of their success is built upon the foundation of their family and their values and the morality that they had growing up. Then their first floor is basically their school and their education, where they learn. The second floor are the first jobs that they get, where they experience responsibility and working with other people and managing money and all of those other things, to where they can get to that third floor, whatever their vision or goal is. And sometimes they just want to be there, but without recognizing the steps that have to take place. So we look at the planning process in terms of sociable city vision and plan as really going along these same lines of first starting with the foundation, which is really engaging as many stakeholders as possible, where we don't want to really identify just specific problems, because everybody has issues around disorder or crime or disturbances or lack of certain types of venues. uh, Everybody has something that they're dealing with, but what we want to look at is what's changing in your community or city, and what are the forces that are bringing about change. Naturally, we know that COVID has had a dramatic change. Downtown storefronts, many of them are vacant and empty, and the return of retail may not be something that we can see for any future, but maybe never at all. We also see that COVID created new governance systems, where government was more flexible in terms of outdoor seating or alcohol to go when you do takeout food. And we've seen hours of operation shift and change. So the governance model is not only coming from government, but as I said before, businesses are organizing themselves, and they're taking more responsibility for self-governance. So the stages of the process begin with this foundation, and we work in identifying a project leader and coordinator, and they work with us to form a transformation team. We like to use that term of transformation because it's really looking at something that doesn't exist and working outside of your traditional institutional structures. So we get a core group of people that represents diverse sectors of the community. We do virtual interviews, and we do a background review. And then we use all of this information to begin to organize what is really the highest priorities that's emerging within the city. We take some of this information and we go on site after we've met with the transformation team to recruit individuals that would represent the three building blocks: planning, safety, and vibrancy, but at the same time, bring expertise or experience in the core measures that come with each of these building blocks. So we have listening sessions where we just get people together into three groups: vibrancy, safety, and planning. And we ask them, what makes a sociable city? What cities have you been to that you would consider the most sociable? What makes them that way? And what is it that you don't have or that you have that matches your impression of others? And then how do you get more of what you think you need? And what are the barriers and challenges? And what are the market forces? What are the governance forces? These are all part of these listening sessions that really engage people to put their perspective and their vision on the table. We also do continue to do individual interviews, do site tours. We do background research where we gather information. in terms of planning documents or economic studies or crime data. And then we, again, have that focus on market forces and governance as it relates to the three building blocks. And then finally, we look at what we call our core measures for an action plan. And these are divided into 6 areas that correspond with the building blocks. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But with that phase, we look for solutions. We call them solution roundtables, where we try to get people together and say, okay, based upon what we all agreed were priorities, what needs to be done in order to get there? And we look at things like research that's necessary, data that has to be collected, policies that have to be improved or changed or created, training, not only of the business staff and management also, but different people in government. You may have to have different people do sound meter testing, so they have to be trained in using the technology. And then finally, just the idea of having everybody comply, not just the businesses, but the patrons and everybody else that has to interact with each other. So the 6 core measures, as I said before, are interlocking components that if you don't have them all together, you really have some difficulty in achieving your vision, that third floor. So when we look at planning as the building block, we say that smart growth planning for nightlife seamlessly facilitates the use of hospitality zones or social districts at different times of day and for different purposes. Within this planning section, we use 2 core measures. One, we focus on quality of life. Quality of life in mixed-use social districts entails a balance of social amenities and requires effective management of sound, litter, trash, bio-waste, and patron behavior. Updated policies, consistent enforcement, and conflict resolution systems help facilitate high standards. Patrons and staff, with the next core measure, need safe and convenient transport to and from social districts at night. Providing nighttime mobility options can enhance the visitor experience, ensure safety of employees who work night shifts, and prevent impaired driving and alcohol-related accidents. So these are the 2 core measures that we'll be focusing in on, and we'll recruit individuals that bring technical expertise or experience or knowledge in those core measure areas. The next is safety, and nightlife settings are typically high-intensity environments with complex dynamics and risk factors. A continuum of stakeholders, principal of which are police and venue security, are invested in protecting patrons from violence, sexual assault, theft, underage drinking, and impaired driving. Within the safety building block, we have 2 core measures. You have the public safety in the nighttime economy, which begins with an interagency collaborative to identify risks and coordinate intervention education with the objective of improving compliance, which is really a term we like to use, compliance, by nightlife venues and efficiently responding to nighttime incidents. Safety then moves into the venue itself, and it's comprised of the initiatives that venue operators and event organizers undertake to protect the health and safety of their patrons and staff at night. Collaboration with regulatory and enforcement agency increase industry safety and compliance. The last building block is vibrancy, and vibrancy is created by a variety of social experiences in bars, restaurants, cafes, and live music venues. And as I said before, it's those spontaneous encounters in public space, such as in outdoor areas, plazas, etc., that also signal the vitality of a district. Public space vibrancy, which is one of the first core measures, offers a continuum of outdoor activities such as sidewalk dining, outdoor seating, things I talked about before, but also street performers or markets or food vendors, art walks, music walks. These are all ways in which you create a truly vibrant city with social activity during the day and at night. And social venues is where people gather indoors, and it's measured by the current social options, how many dining, live entertainment venues you have, and how many seats are available. Mix of clientele, And other factors include the venues, numbers of venues, number of seats, hours, and economic impact. So this summarizes the building blocks, but and the core measures. But the way that we proceed on this project, and that if you choose to be involved, you first begin by an engagement. And this is really where we work with the project management team and also the transformation team, and organizing some sub-focus groups on our first visit with hospitality businesses and public safety representatives. So this is really the engagement process, and it's where we ask this leadership group to identify individuals to serve in the next phase of the project, which is the evaluation. So we organize about 10 people for each of the core measures that, like I said before, bring technical expertise and experience. And the listening sessions really combine the two core measures. So you'll have public space and social venues in one listening session, public safety and venue safety in the second listening session, and then mobility and quality of life in the quality in the planning building block section. And that will be another listening area. So we want to use this to find out what everybody sees is happening in the city and how it's being governed. This all would constitute our level 1 of service. When we work with a city, we go through this process and establish a foundation. But for those cities that continue on, we work in a more in-depth way through a series of 6 roundtables where we help to develop resources as well as begin to identify some potential solutions. And then finally is implementation, where we help share the experience of other cities that have a formal office with staff, a commission or advisory board, as well as Sustainable Hospitality Alliance and Public Safety Alliance. So this concludes the presentation. This is our team, Jim Peters, which is me, the president. I've been doing this for 40 years. Lisha Scholler is a vice president. She's been working with us for about 16 years on multiple city projects, as well as helping to organize our annual events. Jocelyn Kane recently joined us as a senior consultant. She was former executive director of the San Francisco Entertainment Commission, so brings really a lot of experience in one of the leading approaches to nighttime management. And she's also been engaged with several city projects. Sophia Safranek is our communications coordinator, and Marjorie Frere is another senior consultant. She'll join us on some situations, but her background is helping to revitalize Delray Beach in Florida from a really kind of isolated downtown to one of the most vibrant areas with high-end restaurants and entertainment. So she's really got a lot of experience of what it takes to build from the ground up. So I hope you appreciate this presentation, and we look forward to working with you on the future phases of this project.